will Alibaba ever sell product in the United States? Well, that is a particularly naive question because the first website Alibaba had in 1999, called Alibaba.com, was a English website for selling Chinese business to business to America. And so Alibaba has been in America since the day they existed. In addition to that, they've made a large number of acquisitions in the United States over the last year, over $1 billion that they've spent on acquisitions. And they are very intimate with some very important e-commerce players, to include, folks like Fanatics, one of the biggest sports plays out there, including First Dibs, which is a very large company that is doing some very cool things with unique product. They have done some very interesting acquisitions in the technology space with QuickC. They bought Tango. They spent $200 million on 39% of ShopRunner. They spent $250 million on Lyft, which is a competitor of Uber. So they are all over America. On June 11th, they came out with the first real American website called 11 Main. And 11 Main is just an amazing story unto itself. And so I have senior writers from nationwide American newspapers. I have executive vice presidents of strategy for $40 billion retailers saying to me, Alibaba, I thought that was the name of a book I read to my son when he was growing up. And this is executive vice president of strategy for a $40 billion company, literally does not know Alibaba is a company. And it's the largest internet player in the largest internet nation in the world. They are the fastest growing internet player in the fastest growing internet market in the world. And people don't know who they are. And you kind of go, oh, wow. Oh, wow. So the video is done to answer, what should I know about Alibaba, just so that I have the capability to understand how I should respond. And so I think the video is critical to watch. But, for example, the video was published on June 22nd. It was taped on June 3rd. On June 11th, 11 Main was first introduced to America. And so you got to think about it. If you are a Chinese e-commerce player that's very successful, and you're now going to open your first real American-only site, it's not buying something that already exists. You're going to open a new site, and you're going to go in competition with, the Walmarts and the major online players in the world. How in the heck can you do that? I mean, how do you, country boy show up to America and going to take some market share? Well, what Jack Ma, who is the founder and the chairman of Alibaba, does is what he always does. And it's based on his thinking of Kung Fu. And so Kung Fu says, okay, Dustin is younger than I am, he's in better shape than I am, and he's a better fighter than I am, but if I can figure out how to take Dustin's strength and turn it into my asset, I can win this war. And so what would you do if you wanted to do a Kung Fu thought process against Walmart and all the other big titans in the American market? Well, what I would want to do is the opposite of mass merchandising. And so mass merchandising is going to some huge website, or it's going to pack your kids in a car and go to Walmart and walk around this huge big box. And so what I want to do is the opposite of that. And so what I do is I learned from my investment in First Dibs, where First Dibs says you're buying unique things, and I want first dibs on this item. And it's a unique kind of eclectic thing, so it's opposite of mass merchandising. And then you want to call it something unique so it has a different feel to it. And so why not call it 11 Main? Now, Main is in Main Street. So the thought process, instead of you packing the kids and the wife in the SUV and going to a mass merchandising store, what you're going to do is grab your wife's hand and walk down Main Street, USA, on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee and kind of enjoy the experience of shopping. And then why call it 11? You know, the 11 number, it's not like 8 or 9 that has some good luck aspects or some long-lasting faction. 11 doesn't mean anything except 11/11, where 11/11 is, as you know, Singles Day, which is used to be kind of like a Valentine's Day in China. Now it's the world's largest shopping day. On 11/11/13, Jack sold $5.7 billion of product in 24 hours. Not a bad haul for 24 hours. And so the 11 number indicates a singles. It's a relationship between a man and a woman. And so what 11 Main means is I want you to walk down Main Street and establish a personal relationship between a merchant and a customer. But I'm still going to do this online. And so it's a marketplace where I want a relationship based on the uniqueness of the product. Further, to emphasize the reality that this is just the start, and also to indicate the uniqueness, you can't go to 11main.com and get online. If you go to 11main.com, it will ask if you would like to be invited into the shop. And so you have to fill out a form to get invited, and then 2 to 3 days later, you'll get an invitation. So it's the exact opposite of anybody can walk into a mass merchant. It's you need to be invited. And then when they invite you, obviously what they're going to do is they're going to be watching where you go and what products you're interested in, so that when they get really serious about B2C in the United States in 2015, they have a wealth of information as to what items you're interested in shopping for, and so they'll have a head start on that outreach. And so it's just so very, very important that people understand, you know, what this is about. There's folks that I got a call the other day that said, well, I think, you know, that, you know, eBay and Amazon and Alibaba, they're all really the same, aren't they? And you say, no. Jack began, when he began back in 1999, there was 4 important things he said. Number 1, he said, I will be global. My goal is not China. My goal is the world, and that means we must do well in America, because America is where business thrives. The second thing Jack said is, I will never be a retailer, because I am a marketplace. My role is not to sell things. My role is to connect buyers and sellers. And so if I ever become a retailer, I will be going in competition with my merchants. And I never want to compete with my merchants because they're really important to me. The third thing Jack said is, I will never become a bank. And that lasted for only 4 years. And the reason he had to change his view on that is his original site in China was Taobao. And Taobao, which means looking for a great treasure, is a site that has today 8 million merchants on it, selling over 1 billion different items. Okay, so it's a very, very, very large site. And it's consumer to consumer. You know, in that way, you can kind of think of it like an eBay. The problem is people in China do not trust giving their credit card to other people. And so Jack had to become a bank to allow the business to grow. And so he created Alipay, which Alipay is a unique payment system because it holds an escrow. So let's say you and I decide to buy something from you on Alibaba. What happens is you will give your credit card information to Alipay. Alipay will give me nothing. I then send you the product. Once you receive the product, I tell Alipay that you've got the product. Alipay then asks you, are you happy with it? If you're happy with it, then Alipay will give me the credit card information. And so it's an escrow system, and so that was required. So Jack had to go back on what he said. The fourth thing Jack said is, I will never get involved with the logistics of the product. And he never had until 2012, when he realized that in China, that the logistics, the delivery of the merchandise was becoming a constraint to the growth of his business. He started to get involved in logistics. He is now building the largest logistics network in the world. He's going to be investing $24 billion over the next 8 years in developing this network. Last year in China, Alibaba was responsible for the delivery of 5 billion parcels. If you look at the U.S., Federal Express does about 1 billion a year. UPS does about 4 billion a year. So Alibaba caused the same volume of parcels to be delivered in China as UPS and Federal Express combined do in the United States. By year 2024, Alibaba will be delivering 200 million parcels a day. 200 million parcels a day. And that's just mind-boggling, the scale in which they are moving. So, you know, this is a phenomena it's the new wave. I mean, it's a new day, and there's all sorts of retailers and all sorts of consumer products companies that are waking up this morning not realizing that the world is changing as we sit here. And so that's a huge, I mean, that's the biggest story of all time. So when there was a big discussion, would Alibaba go public in China, in Hong Kong, in London, or in the U.S., or if it was in the U.S., would it be on a NASDAQ or would it be on the New York Stock Exchange? Excuse me, you weren't listening to what Jack said in 1999. He said we will be global and the United States is where we want to be. There was no question in my mind, NASDAQ does not stand for the U.S. New York Stock Exchange does stand for the United States. It does stand for the U.S. Guess what? He is on New York Stock Exchange, and that's where he's going to be tomorrow. And he's going to go with the handle for Alibaba as Baba. And as you know, the word Ba also stands for the number 8, and the number 8 means good luck. And so it's going to be good luck, good luck. And as you also know, in China, things that come in pairs have higher emphasis. So if I say, good morning, Dustin, that's a nice greeting. But if I say to you, good morning, Dustin, that's more than double the good morning. And so that's why it's Baba. And that's why his trading signal is Baba. So, I mean, it's just, I'm going all over the place here, but it's just so phenomenal to see what is going on. It's just very, very cool.
You were mentioning in the beginning about the IPO and some of the details and the numbers about that. Can you mention that again?
Sure. So the experts, whoever they are, were saying the stock valuation would be someplace between $60 and $66. I have been saying no, it's going to be closer to 70. The experts changed their mind yesterday and said it's now becoming going to be the valuation between 66 and 68. I think it's going to be higher than 68. I think it's going to be around 69. The overall size of the IPO is actually defined by the dollars raised. So the largest IPO of all time was the Agricultural Bank of China in 2010, and that was $22.1 billion. The largest in the U.S. ever was Visa back in 2008 at $19.96 billion. Of course, Facebook, which got a lot of press, was only a $16 billion IPO in 2012. I think that we're going to see somewhere between 24 and 25 billion as a valuation, as a amount of money raised, and that's going to beget a valuation of something north of 160 billion. And so I've been saying those types of numbers since last October, and it's interesting now that that's where we're going to wind up. So very, very, very cool. Largest IPO ever, larger valuation than Amazon on its first day out, and the stock is a very good value, and it will go up, in my opinion. And in Goldman Sachs' responsibility, they will make sure that it goes up.
And the title of this interview is Alibaba Effect. What would you say is the effect of Alibaba on the world?
Well, that is an excellent question. Much better than the question I get sometimes, what's the effect on the U.S.? That's an interesting question. But what this is really about is the global competition is now really in the game. I mean, look what's going on in Brazil, where there was an article earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal that was well done, and it was talking about a Vans sweatshirt that, I don't know, in Brazil was $500 or something, and you could buy it through Alibaba for $50. And so what we're finding is competition will be global. I know, just like, if you're in Chicago, you go online at Groupon to buy something, and you see it costs $100. Well, you then travel to California, and you're going to find it still travels for $100 because California and Chicago are both in the U.S. Well, what's really interesting is what Alibaba is going to do is level the prices around the globe. And so if you're in an environment like Brazil where there's all sorts of crazy import duties and taxes and so forth, what you're going to find is the globalization of competition, and so the impact is going to be absolutely huge, similar in Russia. And so it's not surprising that Alibaba has huge outreach in Russian and in Portuguese to go into those countries. They are moving very rapidly in bringing goods to China with something they now call Tmall. Tmall used to be called Taobao, which is the first website they had in China, Mall, but it's very difficult to say Taobao Mall, and so they just call it Tmall. And so it's an electronic mall where you can go in that, which is hard to say, has now become Tmall. Okay, and Tmall is where folks are bringing international goods, French, English, Italian, American goods to China to be sold to the middle class. And so that's the basis of the IPO, is the growing middle class. But the reality is, then what is happening is you see Alibaba bought 10% of the Singapore Post. Now, why the Singapore Post? Well, the Singapore Post covers all of the Southeast Asia, okay, and it delivers to Southeast Asia. So a company bought 10% of Singapore Post. They bought 10% of the Australian post. They bought 10% of the Brazilian post office to handle the delivery of goods. And so this is a scale beyond anything that's ever been done before, and it's global. I mean, the impact is it will impact the United States in a huge way in 2015. It'll have an impact on Europe in a huge way in 2016. So this is a global phenomena that companies need to figure out how they're going to engage.
And thanks for sharing today. Did we cover all the important points you wanted to make today?
Well, I don't know. I didn't have any points I want to make. I'm just talking. I don't know. I mean, it's a story that people need to get engaged with, and then they really need to understand it so they can figure out what they're going to do to benefit from this opportunity. And I guess one other point. A lot of folks think this is a retail play. Well, it is, but you got to look at the new definition of retail. Okay, so what we find is lots of retailers are very active in private label. Walmart, for example, has 36 different private labels. Trader Joe's, 50% of the items they sell are private label. For breakfast this morning, I had the granola from Trader Joe's because it's the best granola made. Okay, I mean, it's really great granola. And so as retailers become more and more and more focused on private label, the brands are suffering. And so, if you look at Kroger, they have a 20-foot section of diapers, and that used to be 20 feet of Pampers made by Procter & Gamble. Well, today you look, they still have 20 feet for diapers, but half of that, 10 feet, is for Procter & Gamble Pampers. The other 10 feet is for Kroger's own brand. And the customers have found that own brands have good quality, the same type of benefits, and sometimes even better, and they're cheaper. And so people are buying those. So now here, Pampers, what are they going to do? They're going to stop selling to Kroger? Well, no, you can't stop selling to Kroger. They're huge. And so what Pampers has done is said, well, I guess I need to now become a retailer. And so consumer products companies are becoming retailers. In 2012, only 21% of American consumer products companies sold directly to the customer. In 2014, that's 52%. 52% of all companies that we call consumer products are now selling products directly to customer, which means they're retailers. Okay, and so this is growing, and so this has a huge impact because consumer products companies and retail companies got to decide, how am I going to take advantage of Alibaba and what are the benefits, and this is now putting in front of them. So, I mean, I think that's a huge point as well as to who should be interested in this. It's retailers, it's consumer products companies, it's wholesalers, it's distributors, it's third-party logistics providers. I mean, this is a big deal.
And thanks again for sharing.
Great, Dustin. Good to talk with you. Let me know if I can help.